Hello to all of my dear friends. I apologize that there haven't been many videos lately. I feel terrible today. I feel terrible almost every day. Nothing new, but I just never feel like making videos. I don't feel like doing anything. I'm so sick all the time. But I really wanted to do one today just because I've just been so depressed lately, so angry, so frustrated. And I feel like I should talk about that because a lot of people who are going through grief are going to go through this, no matter what the time frame. It's been over 2 years for me now. Still can't believe that. And I'm going through a really dark place right now. So I just want you to know, even if years have passed since you lost your person or people, it still happens. It always will, I guess, but it just comes and goes. I've heard people say that actually their second or third year were their hardest, believe it or not, and I'm finding that to be true as well. This year has been the hardest for me. This summer has been the hardest for me. You don't heal from something like this. People tell me that all the time. Oh, I can see that you're healing. I know they mean well, but no. If you only knew. If you only knew behind the scenes, it's actually worse. I just cover it well. I've just always been that way. I can put on a smiley face when I'm talking to people. Even when I was in, years ago, my first marriage was very abusive. This was a long time ago before I even met my wonderful husband. This was my first excuse for a husband. He doesn't even deserve to be called a husband. But back then, I was in counseling with a really great psychologist, therapist. And I think I told you guys this story before, but he noticed that about me. He said, I'll never forget that moment. He stopped, he leaned forward in his chair, and he looked me deep into the eyes, and he said, you're still smiling and you're still laughing, but you're going through tremendous pain and suffering and heartbreak. But yet you feel like you need to cover that up in front of people. It's like, why are you still smiling when you're hurting so bad? I didn't know what to say. I said, well, I guess because if I show people what I'm really feeling, I mean, that's pretty depressing, because I would be, I'd be like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, and I'd be one of those pessimistic, depressing people that no one wants to be around. I mean, if I showed how I really feel, Nobody wants to see that. I'd be crying all the time. I'd be screaming. I'd be yelling. I'd be raging. I'd be so depressed that I wouldn't even want to be around me. So I always think of Robin Williams. I think I've just always covered my pain with smiles and laughs and comedy. It's a coping mechanism, so... But it doesn't mean that I'm better at all. It's just the way I cope. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I digress. I made this video today because I wanted to say that sometimes it's a really difficult battle in grief with your faith. And I have gone through that for the last 2 years. I've never stopped following God or believing God or a lot of people walk away, and I'm not going to walk away because there's nowhere else to go. It's like I think it was Peter who told Jesus, "Where else will we go, Lord?" Yeah, when Jesus asked, "Are you going to leave too?" And he was like, "Where would we go? You're the only one that has the words of eternal life." And that's how I feel. Like, I've deeply struggled with faith and trusting God. I'm always kind of in this war, it seems, with trusting him again. But I talk to him about it a lot. So I think that's part of the way you work through that. And I'm just, some people are the kind of people that they're so sensitive and they're so emotionally driven that you feel like you want to give up every day. And I know it's not just me, because I have a very close friend that has also said the same things to me lately, just that they're ready to quit. They don't want to keep going. Every day they don't want to get up. They don't want to keep going. And I understand that. I know. I face that too. It's a challenge to force yourself to push through the day sometimes when especially if you have a tendency for depression, or you're struggling with like a mental illness or a physical illness, or both. Like, I struggle with both. Because it goes together. I have an autoimmune condition. I have chronic Lyme disease. I have mast cell activation syndrome, which is one of the worst diseases in the world. And people don't believe that because on the outside you look fine. But if they only knew what was going on inside, it's you can't explain that to people who don't have it, or who don't have a chronic illness, because it makes no sense. And before my chronic illness basically took over, I didn't believe it either. So I get it. When I was healthier, I didn't believe that. I was like, well, if you look fine, if you look good, and you're like, walking around and talking, you're not sick. boy, was I wrong. Way wrong. Oh my gosh. Now I know, because I have felt like a walking dead person. Horrific fatigue, exhaustion, pain, sick feeling, like you feel like you're gonna die pretty much all the time. Like right now, I look fine, but inside my body, I feel like I'm on my deathbed. I feel like at any minute my heart's gonna stop because I feel so sick. But after 15 years of that, actually it's been more, but the worst of it has been the last 15 years. After feeling that bad so long, you just kind of learn to cope. You kind of learn to press through it. Like, if a really healthy person felt like I do right now, they'd probably be in bed, not getting up. But when you feel that way every day for like 20 years, you can't do that anymore. You have to push through. So people with chronic illness will understand that. I know whoever's watching, if you go through that, you get it. It's like, yep, I feel like I am about to collapse from sickness, but I still got to get up. I still got to go to work. I still got to go get groceries. I still have to pick up my kids. I still have to feed the animals. And I don't feel like doing any of it. I feel like I'm about to fall on the floor and die. It's not funny, but after you've lived with it almost your whole life, I mean, you have to find some way to make it through, you know? So but it's a struggle. It's a struggle. And you really can struggle with your faith, especially if you're, you know, I don't know much about other faiths, but I know about being a follower of Jesus, and I know that when you're a Christian, you really struggle with things like that when your prayers just never seem to get answered. You pray and you pray for years and things get worse instead of better, and it's like, why don't you care about me, God? You know? And we know he does, because he can't lie. And so he says he cares about us. And he can't lie, so that means he has to care about us. But we don't feel that way because it's not intuitive. Like, a human wouldn't do that. You know, a person won't do that kind of thing if they care. Like if you're in a marriage and they're like letting you suffer day after day after day, year after year, and they're letting you suffer when they could stop it. And they're making you suffer. I mean, we don't see that as caring. To us, that's sadistic. That's evil. Like, nobody who cares about me would ever let me go through all this stuff. Like, what? So it's hard to really process that in your brain, because if it was a person doing all these things, we'd say, gosh, they hate us. But with God, it's different, because his purposes are so much different than ours and higher than ours that I don't think we could ever understand what he's doing or why he's doing it, or why do we have to suffer so much? Why do we have to go through all this pain? Why do we have to be Why can't anything good ever happen? You know? It's like you say that for those who love Christ, everything works together for good. Romans 8:28. But we don't see that, because sometimes nothing happens but bad. And we don't get any good down here. Not much. And yet, he still says it all works together for good. So we don't really understand that kind of thing. And that's hard. And there are stories in the Bible that actually illustrate that, but I don't want to make this video an hour long, so I won't go into that today. But it's just very difficult, and I understand these struggles very well. So if you're going through them, just keep hanging in there, keep talking to the Lord, keep praying, even if you just pour out your frustration and your anger and your confusion and your pain. That's okay. David did that a lot in the Psalms. So I wanted to read something to you guys that it's actually one of the best things that I've ever read in my life. And I read it often because when you go through such a struggle with so many things, it's just hard to keep going. It's hard to keep trusting the Lord sometimes. And there's a really great sermon that Adrian did. One of my favorite sermons that I listen to at least once a month probably, because it's just, because it doesn't stick, you know? Like, I'll hear it, we read things, we hear things, and then a few days later we're back in the pits of despair again. So you have to listen to it over and over and over, and just to keep it in your brain. I feel like encouragement, especially like spiritual encouragement, I feel like it's kind of like food. It doesn't last. Like you can't just eat one big meal and that's it for the whole month and you're done. That's going to sustain me for 30 days because I had a sandwich today. And I feel like spiritual encouragement's the same way. It's like you can fill yourself up with it one day, but then 3 days later you're going to be right back down on the floor again, because it's like you got to keep eating it, so to speak. I guess that's why Jesus compared like his words to bread and water, because they really are. Like, so this is kind of long, but it's worth it. It's one of the best things I've ever heard. And Adrian said the same things. He said it was one of the best things he had ever heard. So, without further ado, I will end with this wonderful little encouragement. And if you guys want to hear that really encouraging sermon, that was a great sermon he did called When Faith Fails. I'll link that down in the description box below. And if you want to listen to that, I highly encourage you to. It's good. So, and he reads this in that message too. So if you don't want to hear it now, you can just watch the message and hear it from him. It's called Why I Follow Christ by John C. Hutchinson, Jr. I have not seen clear statistical evidence that fewer Christians die of cancer than non-believers, or that they are immune in greater degree from the diseases that afflict the human race. Some of the kindest and most selfless people I have ever known have had more than their share of bad health. The fact that they belong to Christ did not insulate them from disease. Therefore, I will not follow Christ for promised healing. I will not deny or dispute evidence of restoration of health. I will rejoice at every recovery from what seems to be hopeless, threatened death. I will not hesitate to pray for recovered health for my loved ones and acquaintances. I will set no limits on what God may do, but I will not follow Christ for promised healing. It doesn't always come. I see no sign that Christians escape disaster and accidents more than anybody else does. I've helped dear friends empty muddy water out of dresser drawers and new appliances after a disastrous flood. And I remember as a child taking clothes to a widow with 5 children whose house had just burned to the ground. A bullet is not going to make a detour around the body of a believer. Therefore, I will not follow Christ for any promised protection from disaster. I will not scoff at amazing survivals, nor deny that providence has and continues to work for the good of God's own, and I will keep praying for protection from wicked men and tragedies, but I'm not going to follow Christ because for promised protection from an accident or catastrophe, because most of the time it just doesn't happen. I do not observe that Christians are especially favored with prosperity. Like James, we've all seen the rich oppressing the poor, and justice is rarely perfect in this world. The psalmist has said that he had not seen the righteous forsaken, nor seen his seed begging bread, and in the deepest needs of this life, that is certainly true, but all of us have known people of great integrity who just have not prospered at all. Therefore, I will not follow Christ for promised freedom from any physical want or hope of affluence. I'm not really sure that Christians have a stronger personality or fewer neuroses than non-believers. I do know that there is no bitterness like religious bitterness. It's true. And no arrogance more insufferable. I have watched Christians suffer emotional and mental disabilities, and though it may seem heretical, I'm not sure that I would really enjoy living in the same house with either the Apostle Peter or Paul. Amen to that. God wills that the mind of Christ be formed in us, and there's no doubt in my mind that the Christian's attitudes and actions will be improved by his Christianity. But I am not going to follow Christ for any promise of personality enhancement or perfection or lack of a mental disorder or disease. So why then follow Christ? Why become a disciple of Jesus when life may actually become more complicated, as he so often warned? Well, for one reason alone. In Jesus, we see the face of God. He is the truth, the everlasting truth, the only true truth. God in the flesh. And I know that in his life, his death, and resurrection, I'm reconciled to God, and God is the one who gives life. I believe that nothing can separate us from the love of God. He has all power and goodness, and I trust him in his promises. To him I offer my life, damaged or whole, brief or full of years. It matters not. He is the one certain thing in an uncertain world. He is to be worshipped, not so something will happen to me or the world. Something already has happened to me and the world. But because he is God, who through Christ has reconciled the world to himself. He saves me. He is my justification. He is the anchor that holds. To worship the God of our salvation, to offer sacrifices of praise and thanksgiving, that alone is our vocation. We offer our lives to God, not so we'll be healthy or wealthy or wise, not even so to gain the strength to do great things for him. We offer our lives to him because he alone has claim upon us. God is not a means to an end. It's powerful, isn't it? I feel like everyone in the world needs to hear that. I love you, my friends, and I will see you when I see you. I hope you were blessed by that.